Check 1, 2, 2, 2. Good afternoon, everybody. Before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. This proceedings, let's invite the blessings of the Lord, and to do so, I'll invite the distinguished and honorable Dr. Eastlyn Mackenzie to the podium to do the blessing.
Let us pray. Gracious God and Heavenly Father, we are in your presence here this afternoon. We invite you in to this consultation. Be with us, we ask you. We pray, dear Father. Help us, dear Father, to think clearly, to be respectful in whatever we say and how we say it. Father God, we know that without you, nothing is possible. And so we place this whole consultation into your hands. Grace us, dear Father, with your presence, and grace us with the presence of the Holy Spirit, who will guide us and direct us. And so at the end of this, not only will it be successful, but we will give you the praise and the glory. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Let us remain standing for the anthem.
Your seats. Thank you so very much, Dr. Mark. Good afternoon to the chair of the committee for the cabinet appointed committee for the placement of statues, monuments, and signage in Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Rita Pemberton, and all other committee members. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, and those viewing at home. I'm Moran McCool, and I'm very happy to be the moderator for this evening's proceedings, which is to me a very, very important aspect that we're doing here for the nation of Trinidad and Tobago, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, which is our home, and it's another chapter in helping to write the legacy of our history. So with that being said, let me just take this time to acknowledge and thank those who are here for recognizing the importance and the role of which you play in this exercise this afternoon. And because it's our history, as I said, right? Just a little bit of history on it. This committee, back in 2022, the cabinet of Trinidad and Tobago, the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, saw it fit after calls from the public where there were serious calls to remove some monuments and so on, which will be discussed later on when the committee members come to the fray. There were serious calls, and in the wisdom of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, they recognize the great public interest and importance. So with that being said, it was agreed upon to form a committee to go about doing data collection, information, review, consult with the public, and then report back to the authorities and the stakeholders that will help guide policies that were also identified to be missing or probably need to be tweaked or amended, policies that we need to really treat with the placement, removal, or even erection of statues or monuments, historical signage, and probably even street signs, right? So this process and this exercise is all about that. As you would see at the head table, you would see a really nice mix of patriotic, distinguished patriotic, and I say this not in any light essence, distinguished patriotic technocrats and scholars, many of whom really embody the morals and values which make us a people, because we're a multicultural society in Trinidad and Tobago. And if you could just give them a round of applause, please, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, thank you. And of course, I'll introduce them as the time goes along. So as I was saying, it's a very important exercise because the monuments, the statues, the historical signage, and so on, it will become a serious part of the infrastructural fabric of Trinidad and Tobago. And while they may just be material, whether it's clay or concrete, and we could place some actual cost value on that, what they symbolize, what they represent, the stories that they hold, and the stories that they will tell will be priceless. For me, is as I said before, is a chapter of really us placing ourselves and helping fulfill that legacy. And legacy, as I said, well, for me, is the best way to communicate with the future generations, great-grandchildren and the grandchildren's great-grandchildren, because they would know that we as a people would have done this a particular way back then, and this is what we hold true to, and they themselves, knowing that this is their ancestry, would have something to be attached to, which will further help build the identity of Trinidad and Tobago, because it's a very young nation, about 62 years of independence, yeah? 62 years, which is very young for a nation. Most of the citizenry probably is actually over that age. So we're still in that nation building aspect, and these people you see at the head table here have been championing their lives to help continue to build and help build the fabric of this great nation. All right. So it's very important what we're doing here today, and we'll try to focus on 3 exercises which will be expounded upon. The exercise which is taking your contributions, and I don't want you to feel intimidated in any way at all. The committee is here to take your opinions. They're not here to come to just be masters of their own opinions and operate in a silo. It's about Trinidad and Tobago, and Trinidad and Tobago is not just a physical place, it's a people, right? And without the input of the people, right, what are we and who are we? You understand? So this is an actual really important aspect to take a step, to actually step up to the plate, to be a part of history. We often read about history, but we also need to understand that we are also making history while we exist, while we breathe this fresh, beautiful air in Trinidad and Tobago, well, according to where you are, this nice sun and sea and all different types of things, we don't have to run from the cold too much, but we have our friends and visitors here who will come on vacation and enjoy our nice warm weather and warm people, hospitality, and without a doubt, our great food, right? So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, give yourselves a round of applause for being here. For those who really, I know that the weather has been a little bit discouraging, but I really want to appreciate those that are here. So with that said, let me don't take up too much of your time, so let me get into the discussions, right? Let me just take some time to recognize the committee. And as I said before, it's a distinguished panel of patriotic technocrats, scholars, and persons who embody the morals and values. And while I say that, I know you're watching on some faces and you know exactly what I'm talking about, because that's what they're all about. They're true Trinbagonians, and they represent what we stand for, and I really, really want to appreciate that. So we start with the chair, who is the chair of the committee, Dr. Rita Pemberton, who is a renowned and esteemed historian and author, lecturer. I see they have former educator, but if you know, like I know, once an educator, always an educator. They never retire, right? They never, ever, ever retire. She was head of the department of the history department at the UE campus, St. Augustine. She was also chairman of the board at COSTAT and board member at various organizations, TTT, NALIS, which is the National Library Information System, and many, many other accolades. Now, forgive me, I had to curtail these, portfolios and accolades, because we don't have all evening. We don't have all week, because these people have long accolades, longer than we could really, really amount to. And this is why I'm so very happy that we have them here with this exercise, because I don't see any better fit for the people to actually comprise this information and go forward with it, because it's all about inclusivity, and no one should be left out. As I said, Trinidad and Tobago is a multicultural society. All right? So, to the right of her, we have Mr. Lawrence Ajun, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Heroes Foundation, right? And let me just give you a bit about the Heroes Foundation. The Heroes Foundation is a non-profit youth organization that aims to, I hope I got that right, yeah? Because I've been looking at some of the stuff that they've been doing, and I really, really love it. As I say, it's about our people, and it's about that, right? He is also a communication and development professional, so Mr. June, who will also be presenting this afternoon. Right, and next to him, my apologies. Next to him is the esteemed, I don't know, she doesn't need an introduction, but she will get it still, Our esteemed Dr. Eastlyn Kate Mackenzie, who is a former independent senator, former commissioner of the Equal Opportunities Commission, former educator, and as I said, I don't know why they put former. Always an educator, isn't it, right? Always an educator, because she still educates all to this day, just like Dr. Pemberton and just like all educators I know. And she is a great community development, education, and arts advocate in Tobago, amongst many other things, and side talents. She had the acting gene in her too, so we have plenty of that, right? And to round it off, we have Mr. Kobe Sandy, who is a research analyst with the Ministry of Youth Development and National Service and Youth Development. He's a youth development influencer, alderman, and a former guild president. You hold many portfolios, man. Many, 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 many. So as you can see, as I just expounded upon these persons, these wonderful persons here in front of us, you can see without a doubt why they were chosen to form the committee. Now, this is not the entire committee. As you would see, there are 4 committee members here. Yeah? And yes, and Miss Krista. She's the research report. So there's in the foreground and there's in the background. Right? So we have a lot of people here a part of this committee. So if you see 5 people, so we have 5 people in this committee here today, right? That's how much you're seeing? But it's really unofficially 6, because you're the 6th individual. The committee is not here for itself, it's here for you, the people. So you as the 6th committee member, your say is extremely important. Your contribution is extremely important. There's nothing that you think or probably want to share your opinion that should be overlooked. In every single way, we want to look at what you have to say. They want to analyze it. They want to take it back, because it's all about making informed decisions, right? And that's how we're going to take it forward from there. Everybody clear on that? You sure? All right, good. We feeling good this afternoon? Yeah? All right, so just to mention some others of the committee, just for our knowledge sake, we have Chief Ricardo Barat Hernandez, and Chief, not Chief of Defense Staff, not Chief of Fire Service, actual Chief. He's Chief of the First Peoples of Trinidad and Tobago. And if you know, check your calendar, we have a holiday for it, so you know it's important, right? So he's of the First Peoples, which is very, very important, because we think about all the people who migrated, whether we came from the inhumane advent of slavery, or we were indentured laborers, or we came from migrations from the World War I and World War II, probably trying to escape the Führer and his army. We had people here, right? So we have Chief Hernandez, who is also a committee member. We have Miss Annalene Innes, who is the Deputy Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Rural Development and Local Government. She's also an attorney at law. We also have Miss Zaida Ragnath, who is a former head of public service and former permanent secretary in the office of the Prime Minister, and former deputy chairman of the Public Service Commission. So you see, they're really, really intertwined in this thing, right? Yeah, so we all good. We good with that? Right, wonderful. All right, so with that, let me invite to the podium Mr. Arjun, who will give you an overview on what the committee is about, the purpose, how they are going about doing it, and some little background and a little bit more, so that you could have a little takeaway. And he will guide you on the process this afternoon, so that when we actually start the discussions, it will be fruitful, it will be substantial, and it will be positive. We could make some good inroads this afternoon. All right? So please welcome to the podium Mr. Arjun.
Thank you very much, Ryan, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So, we all know why we are here today, so I'm going to jump straight into it. So, ladies and gentlemen, after noting several calls, as Ryan would have mentioned, for the removal of particularly the Christopher Columbus monuments in Trinidad, the Prime Minister and the government of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago acknowledged that such a matter really was of significant public interest, and it necessitated dialogue at a national level to, one, consider the varied views that exist on the matter, and two, to really further research and develop recommendations that will facilitate an informed response to such a call. So in September 2022, the Cabinet established this committee to review the placement of statues, signage, and monuments in Trinidad and Tobago. Now, from our deliberations and from our research, we considered the authority that lies within the different regional corporations, the ministries, the Tobago House of Assembly, and other entities that are noted in the legislation with respect to the erection and removals of statues, monuments, and signs for the renaming and the naming of signs across the country. From this work, the committee ascertained that, one, there is no common policy or process amongst these various entities to treat with the issue. And as such, we established the terms of reference for our operations that has been approved by Cabinet as these key items. One, to develop a policy for the placement and removal of statues, monuments, and signage in Trinidad and Tobago. Within that policy, develop guidelines for the treatment of statues and monuments that are to be removed and how the spaces they occupy should be utilized. And within the scopes of 1 and 2, to make recommendations to the government on how to treat with statues, monuments, and signage that is referenced throughout the consultations. So as it relates to the meaning of statues, monuments, and the signage, the definitions that we are using to guide our work are the definitions in legislation where they do exist. So the definition that we have for monuments is in accordance with the National Trust Act as any building, structure, object, or other work of man or of nature, or any part or remains thereof, which is of national importance by reason of its historic, architectural, traditional, artistic, aesthetic, or scientific interest. When we look at statues, statues are considered under this broader category of monuments as defined in the National Trust Act. And when we look at signage, while there is no direct definition of signage, there are multiple references in the legislation to signs, signboards, and or advertising devices. So these are the definitions that we're using to guide the work, in addition to the feedback and the input that we are getting around these things from members of the public like yourself. From our conversation with the Division of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities, and Transport, we also we've been noting the ongoing work around antiquities that is happening in Tobago, which is connected with statues, signage, and monuments as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, overall, this committee really aims to ensure that the recommendations made on the placement of statues, monuments, and signage accurately reflect and represent our collective identity as a nation and as the people of Trinidad and Tobago. For us, it is really important to get the views of as many people, as many groups, as many entities as possible and review this through our work. This is why when the committee was started, we first sought to create space for key stakeholder groups who are connected with statues and monuments and signage via the legislation, or who have been doing work and sharing work in the public about these topics. Because we really wanted to ensure that their views, experiences, recommendations, and very importantly, their research was included in the work that we are doing. Now, while this was ongoing, the committee also opened up calls for public submissions in writing via an online form, via email, and through hard copies, so that members of the public can also share their experiences and their views. And today, we are in Tobago to ensure that we get the views of the people of Tobago to include into our work. Now, to date, the committee would have held meetings with representatives from over 55 different stakeholder groups across Trinidad and Tobago. They are all listed there, and I will not go through all of them, but you can get it from the presentation or from us after if you would like. We have also received over 200 written submissions for consideration, 151 using our online form, 53 via email and hard copy, which come up to thousands of pages of work, recommendations, research, and information for us to consider into this that we're doing. So for those of you who are interested in making written submissions, you can, if you can, scan this QR code, visit our social media pages where you can get the link for the online form, or you can send an email to committeeonmonuments@gov.tt, or in Tobago, you can drop off your hard copies at the Division of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities, and Transportation, addressed to the committee. But coming back to today, and what we are here in this room for, and we are here online to do, we are here to hear the views of the people of Tobago as it relates to statues, monuments, and signage. In particular, we would like to hear what you think the criteria should be or should be established for erecting statues and monuments and signs. What suggestions you have for the removal or the retention of specific statues or monuments in particular spaces, and the actions that you think should accompany the decision to remove any, and suggestions that you may have for new statues or new monuments or new signs or signs in public spaces and anything around these areas. For us, our work is an opportunity for the people of Trinidad and Tobago to have greater charge and greater responsibility in how we shape our spaces, how we shape the legacies that we want to showcase to the world and that we want to leave for the future generations. So we urge everyone to leverage the opportunity to share so that your contributions can be included in the way forward. On behalf of the committee, I want to thank everybody for your presence here today, and we really look forward and are excited to hear your views and your feedback. Ryan, I will hand over the podium again to you so that we can go forward and we can hear what the people have to say.
All right, a round of applause for Mr. June and the committee. I'm really glad he didn't hand over the podium. It has a bit of weight to it. All right. So, folks, as we say, this public consultation is just that. Is for us to hear from you, and in doing so, well, I'm just saying it because I was brought up that way. That is, the right morals and values. Respect and manners is the foundation of all virtue. So we'd have that. When persons actually go to the mic, we should respect them and what they want to say, allow them for their suggestions and opinions to be heard. And because you would desire the same for yourself, also if you happen to be uncontrollably passionate about your contribution, I just ask that you be respectful. Respect the persons that you actually giving that message to, and please let us focus specifically on the topics of this afternoon, which is as you could see, the three things here, which is we will find the criteria that should be established for erecting statues, monuments, and signage in public spaces, suggestions for the removal, retention, specific statues, monuments, and signage in public spaces, and the actions that should be taken for those to be removed, and then suggestions for the new statues, monuments, and signage. So we basically kind of creating the framework to help suggest or guide what should be policy. We just creating, information for the recommendation to be wholesome and to be informed. Right? Everybody good with that? Yeah? All right. So when you're ready, we could go to the mic when you have whatever you want to say. Yeah? Don't be shy and don't be intimidated. Nothing is. We also have persons coming in as well. Let me just say, for those who are watching online and who are watching via Tobago Channel 5, we are live. If you're not here, don't dismay too much. As Mr. June pointed out, there is accommodation for written submissions, and you can do that via email. That's on committee on monuments at gov.tt, or you can check out the Facebook page, which is Statues, Monuments, and Signage in Trinidad and Tobago. Right?
And Ryan, they can add their comments in as well.
Yeah.
On the live.
And you could also, you could add your comments in on the live as well. So we'll be seeing that. And if you like it old school, if you're old broom and all corners, you could do the hard copy and you could drop it in Division of Tourism. Right? Address it to the cabinet appointed committee for statues, monuments, and signage in Trinidad and Tobago. And so you have many avenues. They're trying to make themselves available in all ways and means so that you can really have your say and your opinion, because it's important that you own this. It's ours. It's our history. It's not somebody else's history. This is our country. Right? And you may have some suggestions to turn a site or something into some sort of tourist site or whatever, feel free to share that opinion. So when you're ready, the floor is open and the mic is there. When you go in and give your suggestion, however, we just ask that you give your name and tell us where you're from, right?
To just preempt the conversation, that what we would require, what we would love to hear from you all, what's your thoughts on some of the colonial statues and monuments and signage that might be here in Tobago or even in Trinidad? What do you think it should be, if it should be replaced, if it should be kept, why you think it should be replaced, and where should it go? The kind of things you want to hear from you all, so that when we're making our report to Cabinet, that it can include what the people are saying with regards to these things. As Lauren said very comprehensively, this came out as a request or demand by the public to remove Columbus and rename Picton and some of these things that that we hold still from our colonial history. And then there's another argument that says that it is our history, so we shouldn't throw it away. So these are the kind of things we want to hear from you all, so that you can probably give a contribution towards if you believe it should be changed, why it should be, and it is a very safe space for you to share your opinion. So that is just to preempt the conversation.
Yeah. So let me just reiterate, and I'm glad. Thank you very much for that, Mr. Sandy. It really is a safe space. I really glad that he used that term. It is a safe space. We're not here to facilitate an argument or quarrel. We're here to facilitate opinions, suggestions, contributions. It's okay if you disagree, and nothing is wrong with that. That paves the way for healthy progress, and progress is what we're all about this afternoon. So feel free. You can give those suggestions. The mic is there. Persons. Thank you so very much, sir.
Yeah, everyone seems kind of shy, so I thought I would come up and
break the ice.
Yes. Right? To get my face broken. But I'm glad the gentleman, well, my name is Rodney Piggott from Signal Hill here in Tobago.
Oh, wonderful.
I lived abroad for a while, so I'm a recent repatriation here. But I'm glad the gentleman did some clarity, because as I was sitting there, I was wondering whether or not a large part of our focus was not going to be on decolonizing our space, given that Trinidad and Tobago, particularly Tobago, was such a heavily enslaved colony, and we were both colonies, and the enslavers, or what we call the oppressors, or the colonizers, a more colloquial word, they would have branded their space. For instance, when the French were here, one of our most beautiful sites was called Fort Castries. But when the British came here, they were not concerned with preserving that history. That was a brand of France. That was France, pissing against a tree and saying, I'm marking my territory, and when the British got here, they were like, no, let's get rid of that. And it's now called Fort King George. So know that we as a people, claim to be independent, claim to be free, claim to be no longer a colony, we're no longer enslaved, and so forth. It's only fitting and right that we remove the brands of those who had us under their foot. When a gang member no longer wants to be in that gang, he or she leaves the gang, successfully leaves the gang, those gang markings that they have on their face and their bodies and things of that nature, one of the things they want to do is to remove those brands. I'm no longer associated with this gang, so I want to remove those brands. So I think that's the angle. Well, that's one of the angles that we have to look at, is that it's necessary that we remove the brands of those who had us under their foot. Now, when I say remove, I mean from our public spaces. where they are in our face every day. I'm not talking about remove the history. You can't remove the history, so as well. Some have removed the history. You know, we know that. A lot of things we call history is not really our story, but his story. But we don't want to remove our story, so to speak. This was part of the transition of Tobago, right? We were once under the French. We were once under the British and so forth. But what we want to do, or what I would think we want to do, is to take those symbols, right? Most of those very stark symbols, like those thunderous looking cannons that just seems to be everywhere, that represent what? It represents that which was used to keep their property to themselves. You know, we were their property. And if you see, the cannons are pointed outwards. So it wasn't us they were fighting. They were fighting the other dogs coming to take their bone. We were the bone. So why would we want to leave those things all around the place? To remind ourselves of what? That we were once property fought over? You know, I mean, that's a psychological, it's a continuing psychological damage that takes place. What I would think we would want to do, or what I would recommend, is that we put those sort of symbols in perhaps a park. Now, I gave the example yesterday about what I think it's Italy that has created a park of monsters. This is where they put those statues, monuments, and symbols in a particular park for tourist attraction, like Hannibal and his elephant is in that park. They don't have a street called Hannibal Street, and they don't leave Hannibal and his elephant out in a public space where their children and everyone can see it every day and be psychologically reminded down to the subconscious that, you know, this is a man that once dominated us. They put that in a park of monsters. I also gave the example of when Hitler was in power. His name was all around the world. Austria, from Austria to New York. Imagine that. Hitler's name was in New York and buildings, right? But once that war was over and Hitler was toppled, those people who were oppressed by Hitler, they had all, his name is removed from everywhere. You can't go anywhere and find a Hitler Avenue, a Hitler statue, unless it's in some skinhead or white supremacist home or something like that. You're not going to find that in public. Why? Because they know the psychological damage that this has. So I would think that we would want to look at it from that direction, that, you know, these images, symbols, you know, that are a constant reminder that we were in fact a conquered, enslaved, you know, people that were considered less than animals. We were chattel, enslaved, that we wouldn't want those things out in the public, you know, because there's such a thing as cellular memory. And I encourage everyone, in the sound of my voice, to get a book by Dr. Joy DeGroy called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, right? It's a very important book. And she talks about how that which occurred centuries ago, if it's not properly healed out of a people's culture and cellular memory, is still there, troubling us and bothering us. All right, that's my contribution for now.
All right, thank you so very much, Mr. Piggott. Wonderful. Thanks for getting the ball rolling in a wonderful way. In a very, very wonderful way. So just a reminder for those who probably would have just come in, if you could just keep your phone on silent or vibrate, that would be appreciated. And the floor is open to anyone. Again, these are the topics that we are dealing with, the criteria that should be established for the erecting of statues, monuments, and signage in public spaces, suggestions for the removal and or retention of specific statues, monuments, and signage in public spaces, and the actions that should be taken for those to be removed. And thirdly, suggestions for new statues, monuments, and signage in public spaces. And as I said, this information will be collected, collated, and used to form recommendations for government and stakeholders to form policy to go forward, because we seem to be lacking that policy. And of course, we're having a nice nationwide exercise And what we're doing here is to ensure we do probably have to do it again anytime in the future. So we're setting up the framework going forward, right? So, my lady, if you could just tell us your name and where you're from.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Jewel Green, and I'm here representing the Tobago Writers Guild. We're looking at this exercise from a literary point of view in terms of our literary history for Trinidad and for Tobago. We were sharing about the fact that we don't have a lot of signage, monuments, or even a remembrance of some of our literary luminaries. And what we want to be able to see is that history recorded visibly for us to be able to remember that we do also have our own brands of Sidney Sheldons and Anne Rices, right? And we have Norbesi, Marlene Norbesi Phillip. We have the recently deceased Dr. Reginald Dumas. We also have Dr. Earl Lovelace. He is a Tobagonian by heritage, right? His family is from Mason Hall. They're still there by the Calder Hall traffic light there. We also have, some really important persons who have written work in Trinidad and Tobago, coming out of Tobago. And another person would be Eric Roach, right? That very prolific and epic poet. He has quite a number of plays that for instance, the Tobago Drama Guild does on a regular basis. And what we're proposing is one, that we look at how we're putting up the signage and the monuments in and a strategic way in terms of where these persons would have come from. So more location based. So for instance, Eric Roach, he is right there in Mount Pleasant. His heritage is from there. We have Dr. Lovelace in that Calder Hall area. I don't know where Dr. Dumas is from, but I think we need to put some work into making sure that the works that he has currently, that persons would be able to find it as well. That's something we want. So what we're looking at is literary tourism. We're looking at the ability for visitors to be able to come and do a tour, a literary tour, to be able to attract persons, whether they're from Tobago, whether they're from Trinidad, the wider Caribbean regionally, or whether they're from overseas, outside of the region, to want to come to Tobago to see, where Eric Roach lived, how he lived. I mean, if we use Barbados as an example, they've turned Rihanna's Chattel home into a museum. People leave wherever they come from to just go visit her, the house that she grew up in. And I think that's something we need to look at very seriously. So for me, perhaps a monument can be erected in that area. So we can even put on a map a literary tour trail that we can have, from one location to the next, to take photos, to buy books, to rent books, perhaps even for our locals. And I think even street names for the area. It's very important that we in Trinidad and Tobago understand that writing, reading, literacy, as well as the literary arts, publishing books, it's not something that somebody out there has accomplished, right? It's something right here that we can use as a career. It's a solid career path. It's one that's lucrative once we get that support. And I think we should make sure that the people of Trinidad and Tobago understand, by being able to look around their surroundings, that the literary arts is part of our heritage, and they don't think it's somewhere out there in the ethos for somebody else to be able to benefit from. Yeah.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Green. I don't know if I could probably, I think that with what she said as well, it could also add to the locals' patriotism, knowing that the persons, you know, if you have children growing up within that street and knowing that this great person come from there, they would know as well too that greatness is a choice, you know, is a consistent choice you make. So it's not far-fetched or out of reach. So thanks again, Ms. Green, for that. Wonderful contribution. The mic is still open for anybody who wants to.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Leroy George, also with the Tobago Writers Guild.
Afternoon, Mr.
Now,
George.
it annoys me to no end when we celebrate colonial relics, etc., as though persons, slave masters, etc., ignoble persons are celebrated as if they were noble. That being said, I would like to play the role of devil's advocate for a second, because if we are to come to the best understanding of what should and what shouldn't be, then we need to look at things from different perspectives. For example, right? First thing first, I would not be able to forgive myself if I didn't make mention of the fact that I'm a very close friend of Mr. John Prokop, right? One of the 3 persons who would have been recorded to swim from Tobago to Trinidad, and the only person to have been recorded to do so unassisted, meaning to say I had no flippers, nothing, etc., etc., right? And I was with him on his 2nd attempt. He was successful on the 3rd attempt when he swam. And of course, he would have used the currents that existed since pre-colonial times in order to know how to swim to Trinidad, etc. With that being said, first thing first, let's name something after the individual. It annoys me the extent to which that accomplishment, swimming for 24 hours straight, hasn't been celebrated. And I need to just put that out there. Second thing, whilst observing the swim, I looked at things like the fort, etc. And I realized that the past from these ignoble persons is not void of things that we need to remember. For example, I would be very, very, very careful about moving those cannons from their positions and where they're pointed, etc. Because today, because we've been in a peaceful state for a very long time, we don't have a very military culture or militant mindset. And those cannons would be pointed in particular directions, and those forts would be located in particular locations, whereby if for any reason in the future, far or near, we needed to defend ourselves, we would need to know where the enemy is likely to come from, where we need to be stationed, and we need to set up ourselves accordingly. So in so doing, whilst we may be quick to pull down all the relics of colonialism, slavery, etc., and we should, right? Let us also ask ourselves as fast as we go forward, why is that there? Why did they do things in this particular way, etc.? And so in so doing, we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, because there are things that we could keep and without celebrating the ignoble persons involved.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, Mr. George. So if I'm getting you right, we could learn the good and the bad from the enemy as well. Yeah? All right. Yeah, you have to learn the enemy. That's important. All right. My lady?
Good afternoon,
Good afternoon.
Margaret Hinkson. During COVID, when I had a lot of time on my hands, I decided to do some research on the streets of Tobago. Where did these names come from? Who were these people? So I got 40 pages of information. And I could only use the information that was available in public domain online and so forth. So I do not know, this is not original research, original information, but I have the background on certain names, and I would like to suggest that if you forget your history, you are doomed to repeat it. So I am not so keen on obliterating history, while I appreciate that we don't want to hold up as examples of greatness people who really, in the end, were, you know, what were you doing? So I would suggest that we may modify a little bit the whole thing of pulling down. And to take Leroy's point, I don't like statues. Let me come out straight and see. And Eric Williams didn't like statues either. He didn't want one of himself. But I would like to acknowledge the people in the past and the locations in the past by plaques. And I think that was what Joel was suggesting, alluding to. So we have Victory House, where Mr. Robinson lived. We have Hope Cottage, where he worked. We have Castara, where he grew up. And we have various places. So as Joel was saying, there could be a trail of recognition tracing the past. And I would also, in doing my work, I found there was a guy called John Paul, who became John Paul Jones, the notorious John Paul Jones, when he left Tobago, fleeing Tobago in the dead of night, arrived in New York, in the West, in the States there, and called himself John Paul Jones, and he became the father of the American Navy. That man has 2 incidents in Tobago, of both of notoriety. So notoriety can be used to project certain other aspects of people's character, and we could make money on it because that's a tourism thing. You know, John Paul Jones was here, and so I think we could look at both the famous and the infamous. Picton was notorious. I mean, and he was only, I think, a few months he governed Tobago, and we have a street name for Picton. But let us put a plaque that says this about Picton: he was a wicked, evil man. So, you know, so we know that Picton is not a man to be hailed, but you recognize that this Picton was seriously in our history, especially in Trinidad, not here so much. So I would suggest certain nuances when we are looking at our place names. I'm more concerned with the place names than the statues. Thanks.
All right, thank you so very much. Yeah, so we're telling stories. More about the stories, yeah? Plenty of stories to go by.
Good evening.
Good afternoon.
My name is Ronald Dinoon, former Senior Superintendent of Police Tobago. I look at parks. I look at, and the name people don't mention much, is APT James. And I look at the park we have in James Park in Scarborough. They're not kept and they're not advertised as they should. Even I rode to go to Roxburgh Bloody Bay. He was very instrumental in fighting that single-handedly, and it became a tourist road after a tourist resort. And I think we should do more to parks, and villages have so many things that we just overlook. Speyside, where I was born, have Little Tobago, where the bird of paradise came, was brought to from New Guinea. So I'm just want to say, as this came not as an invitation, I didn't plan anything to say, but I think the James Park and APT James should be always remembered. Because remember, in his day, he was not a party. He was just individually independent, going up for election. And they fought him tooth and nail, but he was very good. And his park should be kept up and probably do something to have it looking more advertised properly. Yeah. That's my short contribution.
All right, thank you so very much, Mr. Dunon. Always makes great contributions. And APT James was strong in his Tobagonianness, yes? Very, very strong. That's right. In all villages, there we have. I remember Dr. Pemberton also talking about the history. If you want to talk about the history, you got to get into the folks within the villages and the communities, the elders within the 80s and the 90s age groups and so on. And we got to get into those histories, yeah? So these are the things. Wonderful contributions so far. And same same single carbon atom. So we could either present graphite or we could present diamond. With the more contributions that we have, the more perspectives, the more involvement, we could create diamond. Right? All right, so
good afternoon. My name is Antonia Thomas, representing the Tobago Festivals Commission Limited.
afternoon, Ms. Thomas.
My suggestion for the monuments and parks and spaces we already have is more technologically advanced things that people could interact with to get information on the space that they're visiting. So, I mean, right now QR codes real popular. That would be a good way for people to be able to read up on what the space is about. Like Mr. Dinoon noted, James Park, they could scan the QR code and get the history and be able to inform themselves while they interact with the space. So that it have persons who would want to visit and carry themselves around Tobago without a tour guide, even though you'd want them to go with a tour guide. It doesn't always happen. They should have a way to be able to access the information while they're viewing the space.
Yeah, thank you so very much, Ms. Thomas. It could also be helpful for research, with students as well with research and so on. I think that's one of the big challenges we have with our students, and when trying to do their own research and their own people and history, we have that. You all will know much better than I do. You know. Anyone else? Feel free. We have any comments online at all? Remember, we are live on Facebook and via Tobago Channel 5, so feel free to share that. Mr. Piggott, yeah, you could go again.
Yeah, want to add some more.
Yeah, no debates, but we just
Right.
yeah.
Don't encourage debate.
Just want to add some more pressure so we can come up with the diamond.
With the diamond.
that we actually want. It's often misunderstood when persons like myself speak of bringing down symbols in a place such as this. But what I'm really talking about, as I preface, is actually moving these structures to a place that is not in the public space where we're confronted with on a daily basis. A lot of research has been done on the impact that symbols, especially symbols associated with painful experiences, the type of damage that causes internally. They've recently done a study, or several studies, where they determined that post-traumatic stress can be passed down or is passed down from generation to generation. And they did that by traumatizing female mice that were pregnant, traumatizing them to be afraid of a particular object through conditioning, Pavlov dog conditioning, shocking them when they see the object and so forth and so forth. And when this female gave birth, they found that the offspring were also afraid or showed anxiety towards the same object, right? And they did this over and over again from generation to generation and determined that trauma can be passed on or is passed on, just like a physiological disease, diabetes or something like that. This unseen thing can bury itself in cellular memory and be passed on from generation to generation. So keeping that in mind, right, we want to be very, very careful not to leave symbols associated with pain in public spaces where that people that were affected, which are the descendants of those who were affected directly by those symbols, right? For instance, college students in a lot of places would see, or in the workplace, will see a noose hanging. Someone put that there. A white supremacist put that there. It's just a noose. But when they see it, it traumatizes them.
Stays
Why?
emotion,
They never face lynching, you see. But the symbol carries something that inside of them, they're cellular, no one else responds to it like that. You see, only black people respond to seeing a noose hanging in a place the way they do. No other people does. Why? Cellular memory is there. So it's important that we keep that in mind. So with the mice that is now traumatized, you wouldn't want to say, okay, this is part of our history. Let's just leave this traumatic object there because it's part of our history. It's traumatizing the young. And the young will pass that on and pass that on and pass that on. There's a lot of behavior that we have today that is directly attributed to what happened to our ancestors. Our chief secretary just referred to our prime minister as a house slave. Where did that come from? You see? Our prime minister didn't grow up on a plantation. He didn't face what our ancestors faced. You see, but what the chief secretary is saying is, I see behavior in you that occurred on plantations. Now, it could be wrong, right? And I don't agree with him, and he should apologize for that. But we must now ask ourselves, what else occurred in that painful situation that we are still dealing with today that has not been purged out of ourselves? And symbols keep those things alive. You don't know it's there, but you behave in a way, your subconscious reacts in a way when you confront those symbols and you don't know that you're acting in a certain way. So that's why it's important that symbols, monuments, brands associated with painful circumstances not be left in the public space where especially your children, your young ones, interact with them and they don't have a clue as to what it is, but it's having a harmful effect on the inside of that people. It's damaging to them. And so that's why it's important to remove them, but not tear them down and cast them away. It's still part of your story.
Yeah.
So you want to put them in a place where they can be referenced, put up a plaque. This was once Fort King George, and it was named Fort King George because blah, 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 blah. But no, call it something else. Something that when you say the name, it's something that inspires you. Let's name it, the Dr. Eastland Mackenzie Park or Dr. Reginald Dumas
That's
Park.
a quick buy-in.
Or something like that. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
Because truth be told, and I'll sit down after this, right? Part of our culture, and perhaps many other cultures, is to pour libations to our ancestors, to our past, to remind ourselves of where we came from. So when I say the name King George, I am pouring linguistic libation to that man. And that was a horrible man to us. Why would I want to and when you say something, every cell in your body is informed of what you're saying. Every cell in your body is informed of your thoughts. So why would I want on a daily basis think of this man's name? Why on a daily basis should I think of Picton's name? It was horrible. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So this is the reason why symbols, monuments that are attached to a painful past for that people be removed unless you are the conqueror. You see, like in America, they conquered the natives that were there. So they can leave some street names that's named after those people they conquered. They are the conquerors. So what they're saying is, I own your name. So I can call this Weehawken. I can call it Apache Street if I want to, because I conquered you. I own you. I could use your name if I want to. We don't own King George. We didn't conquer the British. They conquered us. So why would the conquered want to leave monuments in their spaces that remind them of the conqueror? It's psychological damage. Thank you.
Yeah, I get that, Mr. Piggott. And I believe, just for clarity, the persons that came to the fore, I believe that they also understood what you were saying. And the context, even though it wasn't said, I believe everybody shared the view that we need to change the connotation of the symbolism of these things. As my lady said here, what she was saying, put up that he was a wicked man. You know what I mean? So yeah, thank you for the sterling contributions. And as I say, we're gonna keep it respectful, because that's how we're gonna really bring out and unearth the right way forward, or the best way forward, not the right way, the best way forward. Anyone else? Oh yeah, Mr. Sandy, go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. And great, fruitful, rich dialogue so far. But I want to ask a question. In our previous meetings we had with office holders here in Tobago, it was mentioned that there are many parts in Tobago where some names and street names and well, cause you all mostly have street names more than statues and monuments, are named by not through any official way, but by practice. So, for instance, the man living in a greenhouse, you call it Greenhouse Street, something like that. What do you think of that? Do you think there should be some sort of structure in how Tobago streets are named, or should we keep that tradition of, because we always know the street to be this name, we should keep it that way, or should we have a definition or a reason why these streets are named this way? So I ask a question for our understanding as well.
Yeah, and I believe Mr. Sandy, correct me if I'm wrong, he's really trying to say, what would be the criteria? How would you go forward, even if it's not you, it's generations after, they would have to do the same thing. What would we set up? How would we go about doing that? So, in essence, it's like creating your own tradition in how we go about doing things, correct? Yeah? Yeah, basically. All right?
From my own experience, many times, for example, in the past in Tobago, you didn't have a official street name with a sign. Everybody just know that, for example, where I live now, within the last 3 years, you have a name for the street. I have no number on my house or anything. And we just know, well, the road after you pass this, or the street after the cemetery or something, and then they just decided, well, with postal matters becoming serious, and they have to deliver mail, because remember in those days you went to the post office and got your mail. You didn't have any postman and post lady. You went to the village post office and you collected your mail, and all they would put is your name and Lambo Village, Tobago. So 3 years or so ago, they named the street down where I live, and we just have about 3 or 4 houses, William Mackenzie Lane. And I would imagine they named it because of William Mackenzie, who lived at the end of the street, and he was an assemblyman and very popular in Lambo and women's cricket, and he had a history. So I guess that the assembly would have come up with that based on who he was, and because he lived on the street, and actually the property around belonged to the Mackenzies. But you go to some villages, they don't have any name still. They just tell you, you know where Mr. Johnny Phillips' parlor was? You know where Mr. Greg's shop was in Buku Point? You know where T. Queenie house was?
Yeah, we do it the natural way.
You know where Sullivan Dillon house was in Buku Point? They are no street name. Because everybody in the village went to the post office to collect their letters and their mail and so on. So we are moving into a different era. And as such, some of the customs that we had, but the people will keep referring to that Bok Alley. Plenty Bok trees to go there. Go up to Montgomery Church from Maranatha right up to Montgomery Church, Cashew Hill, because there were a number of cashew trees. It had one left there. So how are you finding Cashew Hill? You tell I know Cashew Hill is one tree, and I am sure if I drive up there and start to count, I mightn't find any. So we have to take into consideration how these names were given in the own ways in these villages and so on. And now that we want to become different, and you have postmistresses who come around, sometimes they ask you, who names so? Who live here? Sometimes when I open my mailbox, every Mackenzie in the whole Alambo, the mail in my box. You get what I mean? Because they don't know. And I am not offended by that at all. You know. So we have to look at the history, the way of life, and what was okay then. And
so, Dr. Mark, let me throw this out for you while you're talking about it. What about our Tobagoan where we rename the actual name? So the street up the road is Sergeant Kane when it should be Sir John Kane. Then we have Jagaman Trace when it should be John Gorman Trace.
Yeah. Well, it's just how we pronounced it. It's just how we said it. I mean, I could tell you from my experience. If God used to really read all them prayers where them children write, and they write the Lord's Prayer for you, you can't understand is that they're saying it. In other words, what they heard was different from what the thing. You hear people talk about Sergeant Sylvie burial gong, but Sergeant Sylvie is Sir John something. So what I am saying is I understand very well what you're saying. It's just a sort of mix-up in pronunciation of what the place was in we own gibberish, in we own language, in what we heard, and so on. So this is it, and then we start to correct it, and say, well, and I remember there was a young man, Henry from Lowlands, who actually took on that type of mispronunciation of villages in Tobago, and one of those we was talking about was Monquiton, where we call Monkey Tongue. As far as we concern Monkey Tongue, but it was Monquiton. It's something totally different. You see, you know how many people say Lesquito? Yes. Lesquito, and it's Lekoto.
Yeah.
So we have to know a little bit about what is happening before we come to certain conclusions. And sometimes it is just a mispronunciation of a name rather than naming a place in a certain
I would like to encourage people to talk about communities, because what happens is that sometimes there are people who make real serious contributions in their little corners and they do not come to public attention. So I'm hoping that some of you here would have had such examples of such people in the places from which you come.
Well, if I may interject a little, our elders group, we've joined with the Village Council Association, and we are going to have them at a meeting tomorrow where we've asked the members of the Village Council, making up the Village Council Association, to do the research in your own village, in 30 or 36 villages, and so on. And you come up with names or what of people who would have contributed immensely to the development of the village in any way. Sometimes it's just, this was the famous seamstress in the village. She used to sew pants, she's sewing for children, she's sewing for the hospital, she's sewing for people, she in charging. Every village, I always used to say, when we used to do the heritage thing at one time, every village should have a yellow pages. yes, your yellow pages, that when you look at it, you see who this lady was, the pone maker. When you want pone, drop, start, biscuit, so. You go and miss mercy. When you want such, and thing, and good chocolate and so, go buy so and so. You know where everybody was. You know who was the blacksmith in the village used to shoe the horses. You know? So every village has something. Yesterday we won Tambourine, Elders Day, and they interviewed a gentleman from Moriah. He's 97 now. And when you hear Winfield Carrington's history, where he worked, policeman, carpenter, this, that, what's up, this, that, all sorts of things. 97, going strong, village council, all of everybody kept saying, but how we know about this man? Yeah, I know. He said all of that in the interview. How we know about this man? And you heard about different people from different villages who were famous. So we have begun that exercise. And we expect by tomorrow we will flesh it out with the Village Council Association, Council of Elders and Civil Net Group. We're working on that. So for 2025, we should be able to, and that is why we think that in Tobago, we should have our own village awards, our own community awards, right? Canaan has people, Bonacoda, people, Blackrock, Plymouth, Bethesda, Lambo, this, that, the other. And they will, because the contribution that this one would have made here, nobody else hear about it.
Nobody else hear about it, yeah.
You get, so it is something that is being worked on, Dr. Pemberton.
Yeah.
Ryan, I just want to add a point, because we've been meeting with a number of stakeholders in Tobago, and we had a very, very informative meeting with the Division of Infrastructure, Quarries and Urban Development that has the authority over the process for naming streets. And they shared, they have a process and a policy that guides them on secondary roads, and the policy that they follow right now is that traditionally, as we've been hearing, people in the area, people on the street are the ones who would have come up with the street names, and they don't plan to take that away, or they don't want to take that away from the communities. And their policy is that the people who are in the community, in the areas, on the streets, should have their say in what it is. So their policy is by popular vote and consensus amongst the people in a community. That's how they go about naming or renaming or naming new secondary roads that are coming. So that is the process that they follow. They are one of the entities that actually has a clear process defined that we thought very useful in the work that we are doing. And so that's how secondary roads is managed by the entity that has the authority. Okay. But for primary roads, the division takes recommendations to the assembly with justifications and rationales for consideration, as was done recently, to change and rename new roads. So that is the actual process that happens in Tobago. That was quite informative. And I think coming back to your question that you threw out to the members here today as well, we're hearing different elements that should shape a criteria, that the people who are within a space should be part of the decision making considerations in how things are named, how things are recognized, that we want to identify people who have contributed positively to these spaces, either in communities, nationally, internationally, with connections here. We're hearing, what else have we heard? We've heard about the need to ensure that education is connected to the work that we're doing, that technology is used to support in the education and the connectivity of it. What we heard before was about looking at particular areas that we think of interest, like writers and authors. And one of the recommendations that we've also had coming up from a stakeholder meeting we had yesterday, in line with that, was how do we use street names? How do we use statues and monuments to also inspire the next generation into careers? Correct. So you have the education around different careers. So this person was a baker, and this person was a seamstress, but this person was a author, and they have done this, and this other person was part of the military, or this other person was a teacher, and so you get to see from your everyday interactions careers and opportunities that you may not be thinking about there. So I think we're getting a lot of good information from the work that we're having, and I would be very I would like to hear a little bit more about what people think should be in that criteria. And if you have recommendations, we've been hearing a lot of them, you have recommendations of people or things, or because it might be people, what other things should we consider in this scope of statues, signage, and monuments?
I love that. I think Mr. Pigott will smile at that one, yeah? With knowing that these certain things could help build us up as opposed to keep us strong, yeah? And Mr. Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah?
Yes, you had a hand up.
Yeah.
So many things have been running through my mind hearing this. I'm thinking of this street name that used to be in Plymouth. The road off Arnesville Road was the name of the street. And I loved it, but they've taken it down. I guess the village council thought that was not modern enough. Sergeant Kane, it was a gap in my research. Now, so I couldn't figure out who was Sergeant Kane. Now I know it is Sir John Kane.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. But then the Robinson family, Mr. Robinson's father changed the family name from Robertson because the mail was his mail was going astray. So he changed the name to Robinson. A.N.R. Robinson should have been Robertson. So we have all these historical things that we can put. But the 2 points that I wanted, going back to the Amerindian, our original people, Alubera was Tobago's name. Are we going to go back that far that we want to change Tobago's name? Because then we lose a lot of market recognition. Somehow, maybe because Beijing and Peking and other countries have done it, but we are that tiny. I don't know that we would benefit from trying to tell people, come to Alubera. And of course, Manowar. When I looked at Dr. Boumat's work, and he traced the name, Manhore was the Amerindian name. And we thought that it was Yandomor that became, it wasn't. That is the only Amerindian word that exists anymore for Tobago. That's the only one.
What was the word, sorry?
Manhor. So, and then we know it as Manowar, the bird, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
But that was an Amerindian word that is the only one that survived.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my contribution.
A lot of great contributions.
You know, another area that we could look at is the establishment of certain professions in Tobago. I'm thinking here the fire service, police service, there's another one. Police, fire, prisons. There's still another one.
Defense.
No. And I'm talking here around the 1930s, 40s, police, fire services. Definitely the fire service. There's a story, there are quite a number of stories and individuals who built.
Red Cross? No?
Well, Red Cross, that is older.
Oh, okay.
But that's an activity that's worthy of looking at the establishment of Red Cross and scouts and guides and so on, because those people were involved in social development. But the fire services I found particularly interesting. The police service, when I remember the other one, but you know, there's a history behind the fire service in Tobago.
Okay.
When policemen were firemen. Mm-hmm. Yes. Right. Go by the mic and let the world know.
Well, you should bring that history to the fore, Mr. Denoon, please. Please.
Yes.
And let the people know you might need a street in your name or a monument yourself.
Yeah, she had, when she was talking about it, I remember that when we trained in 1962, I trained, we did fire drill as fire officers with the hose and fire. But I heard Mr. Roberts, Officer Roberts, Talbot Roberts, he used to give a history every year. He died recently, Bevan Sandy. They used to give a history every year on how they started. But I remember we, in the history, in 1951, they separated from the police and fire went their own way. But we knew about fire drill, the hose and the length and so on. So that's a good thing to get to. And also, as she mentioned, Dr. Mackenzie mentioned villages. Like Buku Point, you have Chan Street. Because Chance was a popular guy with a rum shop and a grocery. And in space that we are Luciville. I never got the history of how they managed to name that area Luciville. We have Indian Bay in Luciville. All these big areas have to should do something further to find where what the names were. In space that we have the Little Tobago or the Giles, and in front we have Good Thailand. And this place is just. And we went in some cemeteries too, like in the cemetery in Golden Lane, where some slaves are buried there. Sarah Ganga and about 10 feet tall youths in that area. So there are certain things that we really should do, and then to know who are the persons in the village who were, like in Charlotte, we had Garnet Moore, who was a counselor for years. You couldn't win him at all, and he was doing a good job. And the counselors, you could have approached them anytime, and they go to your lands and show you how they cut the road and so on. That's where Mr. A.P.T. James and these came in. So these are things that we really should do interview, because many names are there because of the long time thing and the pronunciation bad too, So we'll have to look at that in future then.
Thank you, Mr. Denoon.
Excellent. What I want to share just some of the comments that we're getting online as well. I mean, one comment from a Sonia Gad is, when we speak of Tobago changing hands some 33 times, those cannons are the physical evidence of our island, that our island was a premier real estate for the powers that be. Most of the Caribbean's interest is history-based. We can erase everything and end up without knowing how far we have come. The cannons are not encouraging our enslavement. To me, it clearly defines our cosmopolitan history. Another comment that we have from Afia Carrington is that the swim by John Prokop, thank you, was inspired by Sandy, an enslaved who led a revolt against his enslavers in the 18th century Cortland estate and fled to Trinidad by swimming across the sea. A monument should be erected to honor him. The contemporary act of swimming to Trinidad can be added in the telling of the story of Sandy via signage at the monument.
Well, that's a great piece of history.
My name is Kobe Sandy. I will approve that.
Kobe.
Yeah, well, that's a great piece of history right there. Yeah. All right. Anybody else have any more contributions they want to make? But
I'll make a final contribution.
Sure.
And this is to piggyback on my friend here. She inspires me. When she speaks of Alabera, this is a name that a lot of young people today have recently discovered, right? And they're using it. On Facebook, you see the name all over the place, right? And they're using it. So while it may not be beneficial for us to rename Tobago Alabera, perhaps one of these beautiful sites like the current Fort King George, can be renamed after Alobera. And this will honor, because what we want to do, as Dr. Max said, is when we see these names, they tell our story, right? And they tell a story in such a way that it lifts us up, right? And as Joel Green talked about, the tourism that can come out of this, when people are taken to certain sites, instead of the history being about this is where, you know, we were beaten down, perhaps it could be this is where we were lifted up. Right? So something like that can be used to honor us, as opposed to.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Because history really depends on the teller, the storyteller themselves, and that could change the perspective.
Lion tells his own story, different account of the hunt.
And I will repeat that for those who didn't hear online. And the comment was, when the lion tells his own story. What was the rest?
A different account of the hunt.
There's a different account of the hunt.
Yeah.
Nice. We have another comment online, Lekoto. Victor E. Bruce, former central bank governor. So we have another point, another recommendation for something in Lekoto.
We have a lot of unsung heroes in Tobago that sad to say we're reaching the time that we, in the recent times, we seeing them more and more closing their eyes, and it's a kind of sad account, because these people were towering figures and personalities and so on. So I'm glad that Dr. Pemberton actually raised the idea, and actually Dr. Mack as well, about the community persons and communities. That's important. That's very important, because it could be as simple as, in the village of Castara, there was just this one little parlor that sustained the whole village. Because outside of that, you got to walk from Castara to town, just to either get market produce or whatever. So, it provides a serious service within that aspect or that geographical district. Added to that, if I could just add this one. Yes, we are a multicultural society, but we also have subcultures within those cultures. So you would have a different culture, probably, let's say in Charlottesville, different from Bethel, different from Canaan, different from wherever, so we have those different types of stuff. So maybe even the signage and all, because, knowing exactly where you are, not just showing up there, you could read that and you could see it. That point about Fort Castries as well too. So it had 4 forts in the Scarborough area, I believe. Fort King George, Dutch Fort, French Fort, and a Fort Castries. And Fort Castries, the remnants of Fort Castries, I believe, is now Gun Bridge. Yeah? By fire service area. Yeah.
And you have a cannon there too?
Yeah, I think they have about 4. Yeah, they have 4 cannons there still.
Mr. McCool, as you spoke, and you talk about the different cultures from the different villages in Tobago. I taught at Lekoto in 1960, and I taught in the infant department for a time. And there were children, at that time, Golden Lane had no school. So the children from Golden Lane came to school either in Lekoto Anglican or in Franklin Methodist, which was next door. And I tried my best to get a little girl to read in her book. The reading said, eggs for tea. And listen, I'm still trying. She could not say eggs for tea. She would say eggs for tea. She added an H to the E. And then you go to another village and they drop the H. So they say the house, and they meant the house.
Yeah.
But when I studied in England and we were in Manchester, there were students from various parts and so on. And I picked up from one student who had that same type of problem. And I came to the conclusion, the farmers or the plantation owners came from that place who went to Golden Lane or who went to Charlottesville.
It's another history.
So you saw that history
Yeah.
coming down through the language and so on. So we have it.
Yeah. And it's a beautiful language, that dialect that we have. Beautiful.
Well, yeah, well, you know, you're not you're talking to the converted. I am truly bilingual. I make no
No
excuses, no apologies for that, none at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, there is, or there was a group of individuals who played very critical roles in the history of parts of this country, of this island. In the northern part, like, you know, they have always suffered for road communication. But between Charlottesville, come down that side, sea transportation was extremely important. In fact, it was all they had, and everything came and went. But I have been trying to find the men who handled those boats, but I have not been successful. But I know that that activity was the lifeline for those communities, and so those individuals, if we could resurrect them, I think they should be honored, because not only were they carrying stuff for survival, more than on the other side of the island, they were conducting trade with Barbados, selling wood and other items, you know, where on the other side of the island they didn't have the facility. So, you know, those men, those people who handled, made the boats and sailed them around, carrying, you know, keeping their communities alive. We need to find who they are and give them the recognition that is due. I mean, somebody must know, but I've been asking around, and I know about the activity, but I can't put any person to it. So if we could get that from the communities, I think that would be very, very important information. One, for general knowledge, and two, for as a recognition of the contribution that these individuals made.
I don't know. I have a book written by Constance McTeer, The Bocas and the Bulldog, but that was more with transportation between Trinidad and Tobago.
Yes.
I'm not sure whether any mention was made of that type of trade, but I could tell you, in the 60s, when we were doing Best Village, wasn't Heritage Festival yet, it was Best Village, and Gilbert O'Connor, myself, the late Clifton Winchester, and so on, we would leave from here and go into Castara. In those days, you drove over Mount Dillon Hill. The hill was still okay. Drove over there and you went. And the boys from Plymouth, I remember the boys from Plymouth will come over to help us in Castara with the drumming and so on. And they used to sail over day or night. Them Ford boys, they on their boat, the little fishing boat, and they just sail over. Me, I think the boat had no engine. Me, I even know. But they're coming over, teach them to drum and accompany, and then they sail back to Plymouth. So I would try and see if I could find out more about that.
And that's a real good part of history because, well, me personally, I'm born, bred, raised Tobagonian. I only know in Tobago now from land in my big ages, but when I was small, I would know the Castara, the Plymouth, the Charlottesville, the Lambo, the Roxbury, everywhere by sea. That's why I know by sea. You time the waves and you come aboard. And now I know in the areas going about, well, on land now. So, you know, I'm learning it. So that's really, really good history and culture.
It is a good history for us with that thing to...
So we have both land and we have both sea, you know. Near, far, local and abroad. We have a vast, rich, historical... We have so many stories and heritage, such rich stories and heritage.
I think the sea life is so important, and it has taken hold in the Buku area, where you had people like Sullivan Dillon and those people and who discover the reef and swim with sharks and all that type of thing. So we know about that aspect of it, and that comes in with the book of people and the goat racing, and they've actually dug up the history of that type of thing. Huggins, Cadiz and all those people, my old man and all those people. And so we could start a project now to discover those people who used to sail around the coast. I know you know that there is a song, there is a folk song about that. Yeah, sailing from where to where, and when the boat meets so and so, we have that. Yeah. Yeah, we have that. Yeah. We have a song for that. We play it all the time. Tamarind will play it all the time. It's on Heritage. Crusoe. No. The different one. Yeah. So we have some of them in song, but I'm not sure if the names of the people. You more or less will find the names of the boat and the places where they would dock on their way to the Wrongly Island song. We call it the Wrongly Island song. So this has actually stirred up a lot of interest in the types of research.
A wonderful exercise this is. I really liking it. Yeah. I'm forgetting I'm the moderator at points from point to point. I'm sucked in.
We all in this together. We all in this together.
All right. So I've went to the mic.
Good evening, everyone. Dave Phillips.
Afternoon, Mr.
Family
Phillips.
Home. How are you?
Good.
Okay. I wish to address the first aspect of the topics presented, which is the issue of criteria. I suppose they'd have an individual number of each criterion that makes up the criteria. I wish to suggest 4 areas for the consideration of the members. First, the impact that the individual has had on the society. That impact should be profound, well established, well appreciated. The extent of it should be recorded. So that's 1. 2, intervention. Did you just stand by or did you intervene? And in that intervention, the impact would have been a function of that. So we look at the extent of the intervention, how crucial that intervention is in the lives of the community. 3rd, innovation. So how do we get around from Charlottesville to Palatine to Plymouth? You know, what innovation came about as a result of that? And finally, inclusion. Very important. Did you do it on your own? Did you include others so that you embrace the efforts of the community? Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Phillips. Now, forgive me if I'm on my P's and Q's. That's my former teacher there, so I'm straight, yeah? Yeah. And well, from his contributions, you could tell why I'm so very interested in the history. It's something that's very, very important. Anybody else has any other contributions? Yeah? You could go to the mic.
Would architecture be a good area to look, the existing architecture, to determine whether a monument or a signage should be placed? And does that criteria, does it extend to the removal?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because for something like Fort King George, around Tobago, it have a lot of spaces that the thing happened in the area. So like the burial site and the forts, the history happened there. And you could still see architecture existing from the particular history. I feel like that should be the criteria to not remove it from the spot, depending on how much of the architecture is still intact.
Something like the steps to nowhere around Franceville, the first steps for Bishop's High School, secondary school.
Not only that, what about long step from Castro Street up to Bonnet? Long step.
Yeah. I think added to infrastructure, we I did some research. I did a feature on some trees that were actually West African trees. I think we have 2 West African trees in Scarborough. One is in the Botanical Gardens, and one is right at Sandy Point. It protruding through the concrete right now. Is on the roadside. Is a big tree. It's the only 2 trees like that, I believe, in the whole of Tobago. So, and they have nice little write-ups on them on what now. They brought them across. Huh?
Baobab?
Come again?
Baobab trees?
I can't remember the name right now. Very fat. Well, I'm not sure, but I know there are 2 trees there.
Yeah. What do I call it? Tamarind again?
I'll have to go back into my
What do you call
research.
it?
Guinea
Guinea tamarind.
Guinea tam. Yes, one of them is the Guinea tam.
Guinea being from
Yeah.
an African.
That's what I would know it as. I didn't know it as all the scientific names I should though. you know?
Baobab.
Yeah.
Baobab. They have, yes,
Yeah.
used to be. There's one in there.
There's one there as well too.
It's still there.
Unique tree. Unique, yeah.
There was one by the Methodist manse.
Okay.
By the Methodist church, yeah.
No.
That's the one. Anybody who went to Methodist school who stone that tree. So
and the reason why I mention it is because we may try to do landscaping as just piggybacking on what Ms. Thomas was saying with in terms of the criteria, moving the architecture and so on. We might just think that is a tree just blocking the way and we cut it down. You know what I mean? Just like the or famous trees, you know. Well, one fall down recently, not so recent, but you know, but the famous trees. Mr. Thomas, you were saying?
This.
Could you mind? Huh? Sorry.
Our local mango. Yeah. Mango there. Everybody going to build a house now. They meet those trees there and they wouldn't make the area fit in with the mango tree. They cut it down. That's the next trouble we have.
Yeah.
Cut it down important fruit trees.
We're going from independence to dependence.
Yeah, we lost a lot of cashew trees too by that.
Yeah.
Everybody cut down. When I was growing up, we had a cashew field, you know, and all these things. And these things that are, we don't see the value in them. Even you plant a tree, even the trees on the highway, those trees I can remember, some students came from Australia and planted a tree that resembled a motel. Not the tall motel that we had long ago, they resemble motel trees. And I saw them cutting them down. When special works had nothing to do, they used to cut down all these trees, you know, the grape trees by the side of the sea that God put there to keep the land, they cut them down. That's why the land eroded, you know. Down at in front where Wasa used to be, where American stores were the last time, there are some short grape trees. You couldn't, they were holding the land. So as you move them, they're gone. Buku Point. When I went to Buku Point in 1963 to work at Old Grange, that whole area was the line of grape trees. And what they have now, they have the manchineal to kill you. They didn't cut any manchineal, but they cut any grape trees. You understand? Because a soldier died, English soldier died here, he ate the fruit.
Yeah, he thought it was
and,
dogs.
and he died. He buried him in St. Andrews there. And a lot of things that we have that and young people want to hear sometimes, you tell them not to do something and you try to, every guy traveling and the young boy want to talk, I talk. And see, but some of them, I was coming on Dal Spring the last time, and if you're going to turn right on the highway, I said, excuse me, sir, you can't turn right here. He said, who says that? So the answer is bad rough sometimes. So we have to do something. Tobago is a beautiful place, you know, very, very beautiful. Very beautiful. Castara, probably VSP side, but I must both be side because it's the only village that has 2 habitable islands outside. You could live on Goat Island, you could live on Little Tobago, the bird of paradise islands. A guy from New Guinea brought those birds here, but they went they got the stinking when the hurricane came in 1963, blew it in. So we have to look at it carefully and see what we should do. Those who are still able to do it.
Yeah. Thanks again, Mr. Dinoon. Ms. Thomas? And we're winding down with the time, so I believe if we have another contribution after Ms. Thomas, we could probably take one more. Yeah?
This might just be an isolated incident, but take an example from the changing of the name of Milner Hall to Freedom Hall in UA. He was, yes, a awful person, but the identity that the students had with the name Milner Hall was something that they did not really take into consideration. So they changed the name, and then people could not really identify with the Freedom Hall that came after. So I think when we considering to remove certain monuments, statues, signage, we should consider how the persons in the area identify with it. Even though the history may have been dark, which we should not be afraid to recognize dark moments in our history.
Because it shows resilience.
Yes. We should also consider how the persons in the surrounding identify with the space before we consider removing it. So I guess consultation with them before removing the thing.
Yeah, so that's basically what the committee is all about, coming together to build and input this policy. So as just to reiterate, it's not a I say you do sort of approach. Is what will we do and how should we do it? How should we go about doing it? So that this committee now could take that information and articulate your views as best as they can in recommendations to the government of Trinidad and Tobago and the stakeholder authorities that that will have whole remit over the replacement or the removal or the erection or how they will be treated, how the spaces will be treated, and so on, right? So and I really love this discussion, and I know it fostering a lot of thought. So don't feel burdened, even if you have, after you leave the door and we conclude, it doesn't stop. So know that you could still submit submissions, whether written, you could do it via email, committee on monuments @gov.tt, and you could also check the Facebook page, or you could do a hard copy submission to the Division of Tourism, just address it to the Cabinet of the Cabinet Committee of the Placement of Statues, Monuments, and Signage in Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah? The Facebook page is Statues, Monuments, and Signage in Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, just as the committee name as well, without committee. Very straightforward.
Just to go back to the previous conversation that we were having, and again guided by the definition for monuments as in the National Trust Act. So monuments are defined as any buildings, structure, objects, or other work of man or nature, or of any part or remains thereof, which is of national importance by reason of its historic, architectural, traditional, artistic, aesthetic, or scientific interest. So coming back to that previous discussion about monuments, noting also that there's ongoing work by the Division of Culture and Antiquities, around antiquities as well, and a broader look at this area. And just to be clear, because there is something that is called, there's a term called sustainability monuments, and that is architecture, natural landmarks that symbolize or promote environmental stewardship, sustainable development, and the harmony between humanity and nature. And and I think we're hearing that in the conversation. So I just wanted to raise that to get feedback from you all, if that is what we are actually hearing from the contributions here, that we should also be considering sustainability monuments in how we look at statue signage and monuments in Trinidad and Tobago. And by all of the nodding heads, I will take that as yes.
All right. So looking at the time now, it is now 6:54. So at this point, what I would allow As I say, I really want to thank you all for the contributions. They really give yourselves a round of applause, really and truly, ladies and gentlemen, really and truly. It was a spirited discussion. I really enjoyed it. I thoroughly enjoyed it. If you know me, I ain't cliche. I don't read from script. I speak honestly from the heart, right? I'm very much Trinbagonian. I love my heritage, my history, and my people. And I am always taken back when I hear the millions of stories, hammer biting my ears from ear to ear. You know, you identify with this, you know about the history, because the thing about the beautiful part about Trinidad and Tobago is that your history not far-fetched at all. It's like right there. The person used to live across the road or just that next village. You could catch a car or catch a boat, and that's where they're from, you know, and it represents the red, white, and black. You know, I'm also very privileged and honored to be here with these persons at these committees, because as Trinbagonians, we excel, right? And it's our generation of Trinbagonians that very stubborn about success, but they also hold immense humility, which I think kind of worked against most of us and persons in the community, because we just do, and we don't do it for recognition. But this is why I'm asking that we could point out some of these people, and as Mr. Phillips pointed out with a lovely criteria listing that he pointed out there, I think that we could do that as well, you know, because we have a lot of unsung heroes, and we should be proud of the things, the inroads that we made, the challenges that we overcome, the mistakes and the hiccups that we made, yes, because we need to know them, to know how we came out of them or how we overcame them. All these things are very important. I have a friend who is Rastafarian, very Rastafarian, very spiritual. And he doesn't listen conscious music at all. It's real bad boy music. So one of these days, you know, because real songboy tune you listen, I was like, but how come you listening to that? Why you ain't listen some Peter Tosh and some Dennis Brown and thing? He is like, Egan, I love them thing, you know. But I need to listen these stuff to know this is what really out there, because that's the reality. I can't be stuck in a bubble thinking that we live in a utopia. So I want to take the points of what persons were saying, like Mr. Pickett and so on. It's not about necessarily removing the history, but is putting the correct history there. You know, history that will benefit us. Is about, you know, as I say, history comes from the point of the storyteller. So that is important. All those things are things we could consider, and much more. So, you know, when you go home, you think about it, you share the conversation with others. Those who are looking on and didn't have the opportunity to be here, you could do that too. With that being said, I would allow the committee to leave any closing remarks that they would like.
Well, the closing remarks would be to express our deepest appreciation. Now, staging an activity like this from Trinidad across the sea was not a simple, smooth exercise. And we could not have done it without the inputs from a number of individuals whom I wish to name. We've worked closely with the Division of Tourism, Culture, Antiquities and Transportation. And they have been very facilitating to us in all our movements and helping to get everything organized. And so I would like to really give special kudos to Michael, the driver, who had to ferry us up and down, Miss Map, and that Deandra, who organized all our movements. Information, the Department of Information, they too were with us. Channel 5, Tobago Updates, we were there featuring and pretending to be important people for a few moments. And the Chief Secretary's office. You know, all those bodies gave us the assistance that we required to be able to pull this off. And so we express our gratefulness to them. And we certainly express thanks to all of you who took the time. I know the rain dampened some people. All of you took the time to be with us And those who came yesterday, we also had the privilege to speak to the Secretary for Infrastructure and his team. And we had a team also from the Secretary from the Division of Tourism, and particularly Dr. Thomas, who was really behind and supportive of the whole exercise. So on behalf of the entire committee, I would like to say thank you to all of you and to all those who gave us the assistance, all those who have listed. Thank you all very much. We value your input, and we hope that you will still be able to write. Those of you who didn't feel brave enough to speak, you could write to us through the various forms that have been advertised, and we appreciate. I mean, there's a lot of work that we have to go through, but we value the varied inputs, experiences of people. This is what we want to be able to include as we formulate and make a policy recommendation to the government. So again, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks from the heart.
All right, wonderful. Yeah, and of course, folks, we'd like to, well, me personally, I'd like to thank the committee, starting with the chairman, Dr. Rita Pemberton, Mr. Lawrence Ajun, Dr. Eastland Mackenzie, and Mr. Kobe Sandy, who, he advocating for the statue, right? Yeah. So I'd like to just give a round of applause for the committee for being here, as well as Miss Danielle, who was, support on the side here, and the other committee members who are unfortunately not here with us, but we want to just thank the committee, and of course you, those who made it here. I really want to thank you all for your contributions. Really want to thank you all. Made it a successful evening, made it a fruitful evening as well. Those online, we want to thank you for tuning in, and of course remember, you can email your opinions, comments, your recommendations to committee on monuments at gov.tt, or you can check out the Facebook page, that's Statues, Monuments and Signage in Trinidad and Tobago. Or for those in Tobago, you can hand in your actual hard copy recommendations to the Division of Tourism, right? I want to also thank the Department of Information, which I'm a part of, right? And they always here working behind the scenes. They are the ones responsible for the broadcast. So a round of applause for everybody for a wonderful evening. I want to thank also the library for accommodating us. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that we continue to see the importance of what we are doing here, because we are continuing to write our legacy in this very young nation called Trinidad and Tobago. And it's about all we and not I, right? It's we, right? So we have to do it together. So thank you also very much. And I wish you all safe journeys on whatever destination you're going. And, spur on the conversation, carry home the conversation, spark it up with somebody and tell them these are the things that we're doing here. Right? So thank you all so very much. Have a wonderful remainder of the evening.
Thank you, Ryan.